Hi, good morning. This is David Roche, Quantum Strategy, the mini podcast about macro matters. Well, there's not a lot that I can tell you that you won't know by the time you've listened to this about the Trump inauguration and his program. So I will put up another podcast when I have had time to evaluate what the significance for investors is of what the president announces. Let me say that there are two issues I think might be exciting in two ways for investors. The first is this: Trump is going to come out of anything that remotely smacks of green power, green energy, and he is going to go for drill, baby, drill. What results from that is that things like data centers, which are huge users of power, so more power is needed everywhere in the world, but also particularly in the United States. That power is going to come, oddly enough, not from fossil fuels. It is going to come from nuclear. Now, why nuclear? It is because nuclear has become miniaturized, like all technologies. It starts big, it finishes up by being small. It's not pocket-sized nuclear, but it certainly is at a plant level. In other words, you want to have your massive data center. Right beside it, you want your own little nuclear power plant. And I think no matter what Trump does, he is going to push everything which uses data, be it AI or digital currencies. And that is going to result in a huge amount of increased demand for electricity. And of course, some of that electricity will come from his drill, baby, drill, deregulating the oil industry, walking out of the Paris Accords, so that sort of thing. But most of it is going to come from nuclear, miniaturized nuclear. Now, that is really extraordinary because it actually drives green energy, because nuclear is a part of green energy. You may say it's not renewable, but it certainly is a part of green energy along with wind and solar. So that is one of the rather odd side effects of everything that Trump is going to say today. So if you want to make a ton of money, don't put your money into Melania's Bitcoin thing, because that is pure feudal politics of the local baron making money out of the peasantry. Put your money into something solid which would benefit from Trump, and that is nuclear. I leave you to consult your infinitely wise bottoms-up analyst to talk about that. The negative side of what Trump is doing is undoubtedly look to tariffs. If the tariffs come in as he has promised, 60% on China, 10% on the rest of the world, and more on Mexico and Canada, that will probably be the weakness of his economic policy, the Achilles heel of American exceptionalism, because it has the potential of disrupting world trade so that the world goes down a spout. There will be instantaneous retaliation from other countries, including Europe. US inflation suffers, and by the end of the year, the Fed is raising rates, and then everything falls out of bed, because all of these asset prices depend on higher rates not happening. And higher rates, policy rates from the Fed are going to happen. They're not going to happen much anywhere else in the world except Japan, but they're going to happen in the US. That's where the bubble economy, which Trump is going to see as his ticket to legitimization in economic terms, that's where it's going to fall out of bed. Okay, now, turning to the data. Well, the single most important bit of data that came out at the end of last week was the Chinese growth rate. And if China was growing really at 5%, which is the miraculous number which it achieved. If it was really growing at that rate, there would be no need for all this stimulus. But if you dive into the figures, you find this. One, much of the growth is actually driven by heavy-duty things like chemicals, steel, etc. And of course, on the edge of that, you have the new economic areas like renewables and above all AI, which are growing massively. I will tell you straight away that I don't believe these figures, but I do know one thing about them, that if this is what is driving growth in China, it has to use a lot more electricity. Okay, we don't have the electricity production figures for the last month of the last year, but we do have the ones going before that. And what they show is the growth is 3% in electricity production. If that is true, then it is truly amazing that things like steel and aluminium and chemicals and AI, all of which use a hell of a lot of electricity, can grow by 5% without using any electricity. That's why I don't believe the figures. I think the underlying growth rate in China is around 3%. Now, if that is true, we must also remember that that growth rate is helped by what I call the three great pull forwards. A pull forward is when you take demand from down the road and put it into the demand equation for today, leaving a hole down the road. But what are these three pull forwards? Number one are subsidies for renewal of consumer durables like washing machines, etc., which have now been extended to things like rice cookers and laptops. That is one great pull forward. The second great pull forward is every exporter in China has been stuffing ships with goods for the United States before Trump comes in and puts on tariffs. That will vanish after Trump is inaugurated. Second great pull forward. The third is flipping property. I don't believe that underlying final demand for property in China is doing well. But the property figures look good. And the reason they look good is because all those who have received state interventions, stimulus, to make them look good, are making them look good. You simply transact them among yourselves at inflated prices. After all, Chinese property prices are down about 20%. They should go down about 40% to have price discovery and start going up again, but they haven't because they're not allowed to. So, bottom line, the demand figures, even at 3%, are probably inflated by the three pull forwards, which will disappear by the middle of next year, leaving a vicissitude. That is why I would remain very cautious. Now, this week, we're having the Bank of Japan as the main data point. And I think, against consensus, that they actually won't increase interest rates. The reason for that is because they actually want to study what Trump is going to do before they do increase interest rates. Because if they decide that the Trump packages of tariffs are going to wend their way through China or elsewhere or directly into their own economy and depress the economy, they're obviously not going to increase interest rates. Given the breadth of policy announcements which Trump is going to make today, I would say they would need a bit of time, even if they've got hundreds of economists, which I'm sure they do. You need a little bit of time for all the squawking in the chicken house to get to being a single tone and message. And I don't think they'll be ready to raise interest rates this week, but they might do, as a kind of sop to Trump that they're doing something about the weak yen. It depends really which sort of politics they want to play, domestic or international. Thank you. Have a good week. I'll be talking to you again when I've had time, which will take time given my limited brain power, to get my little head around 100 policy announcements today. And then I'll be back to bore you even more.